Hey there, everyone. Thanks for listening to Limited Engagement. I'm your host for the show, Jared Duran, and this is our 100th episode. The guest for this 100th episode is Nels Cline, whom you may know from his work with Wilco for the past 15 years, or his work with Mike Watt, which is fantastic. He's been around for a long time. He's an amazing guitarist. I was thrilled to talk to him. I'll get that in a minute. As I mentioned, it's our 100th show, and that's pretty monumental to me. I thought I would take just a couple of minutes to sort of reflect on that, and it's been an interesting almost 4 years of doing this. In May it'll be 4 years. Those who began listening to it, well, at the beginning, know that it was a monthly live show, and then took it to sort of weekly for a while, and it was, I don't know. There's a whole book that's kind of, I don't know, whatever. It's called The Arg and Blarg. You can get it on the Hoot and Waddle shop. It goes over the first 2 years of the show and the history of it. But I didn't know I'd be doing this long, or that it would have the legs that it did. Originally, when I started doing this, I just had the assumption that nobody would care, nobody would listen, which is usually the place that I start from when I take on any new endeavor, which is clearly a positive, uplifting place. But here we are, 100 episodes later, and I've gotten to talk to people that I never thought I would get to talk to. Nels Cline, today's guest, being one of them, but Robin Hitchcock, Lou Barlow, great Joey Burns from Calexico, great musicians whose music I have been a fan of for a really long time, and never dreamed I would get to sit down and have a conversation with them. And then I've talked to people whose work I greatly admire, people like Matt Bell, people like Andrea Scarpino, who now we work with as an author, as a writer, poet, person we publish for Hoot and Waddle. And, a lot of that came out of this. Any of the other podcasts I do now came out of this. There have been some great conversations that I had that didn't get recorded. In one case, very early on, the first time that I talked to Gia Oak Baker, that didn't get recorded because I forgot something that day. I had a great conversation with a brilliant singer-songwriter whose work I highly recommend, named Chuck Prophet. I talked to him after a show and didn't realize until we finished talking that I had forgotten to hit the record button. That was great. I had a pretty cool conversation with the judging panel of the folks at Nerd Slam a couple of years back, when it was still Phoenix Comic-Con, before they changed the name. And that was a lot of fun, and only to realize that there was where I'd put my laptop was getting some interference from other equipment in the room, and had this horrible buzz noise throughout the entire thing, and I could not air it. When I keep telling myself when I have the time that I will go back and make myself listen through it so that I can transcribe it and at least get the conversation out there, because it deserves to be out there at some point. And hopefully one day I will have all of those people back individually, because they were very nice and generous with their time, and wonderful people doing great stuff. But so I guess what I'm saying is it hasn't always been perfect. It certainly, I've gone through some things, a lot of them very publicly here on this show, because for some reason I can just sit here and talk into a mic and be much more open with strangers listening to this than I could ever be having a real conversation with somebody, much to the detriment of many relationships. So there's that. A lot of you guys have been listening since the beginning. There have been a lot of new listeners over the past 4 years. There's been a lot of great, feedback, whether in the form of being named Best Podcast by Phoenix Magazine a couple of years back, or the consecutive nods from the Phoenix New Times for Best Cultural Podcast, and little write-ups here and there, and relationships developed with Yab Yum and other podcasters, and there's just been a lot of great things that have come out of this, and I love doing this show. And it's been even if it hasn't been easy, and it hasn't been, it's something that I'm really glad that I have done, and I don't know where I would be now if I hadn't done it. So thank you all so much for listening, and please keep listening and keep telling your friends about it. And who knows if it'll be around for another 100 episodes or not. We'll certainly get to that much faster based on the recording schedule that I've got so far for this year. To get to 100 episodes in a little under 4 years means, if you break that down, that's about 25 episodes a year, which is, about once every 2 weeks, which is not a whole, not a horrible output. But I'm on track to do 40 shows this year. I've already got, I think about a dozen scheduled, and some in the can already. And so it'll be something. Thanks for sticking around, and it means a lot. Don't mean to get all I'm not going to get verklempt in the opening. Just not going to do it. Anyway, so I thought I wanted to do something kind of special, or at least special to me, for the 100th episode. Oh, there goes my voice cracking for no good reason. I want to do something special for the 100th episode, and I had put this interview almost didn't happen. I'll give you, this is turning into one of the longer intros, but I wanted to get my little 100th episode celebration talk out of the way too, because it's special. It's not nothing, Anyway, so this interview with Nels Cline almost didn't happen, and I'll tell you what. I had gone, at this point, when I do these interviews, I will always, I've at least learned enough with booking touring musicians or other people passing through that I need to find the right contact person, and when possible, it's the touring promoter or publicist or whoever for that artist, when there is such a person, when they're not just doing everything themselves. And so I had gone to Nels' website and found that person to contact, and sent them an email, and just didn't hear anything back. I was expecting it not to happen. That does happen. It happens less frequently. Usually I'll at least get something of a so-and-so is not doing interviews while on tour. They don't talk day of show, all that sort of thing. So that happens more often, but occasionally I'll get the no response. So I was prepared for that. But I was talking to my buddy Jason Kyle, who co-hosts What the Fork with me, which is a podcast we do discussing The Good Place. That's a whole other show. And he mentioned that he was going to talk to Nels for New Times, and I mentioned that I had sent a request out there for the show, and Jason's great. He's always just super supportive and encouraging, and he's like, well, here's the contact that I had. Why don't you try them? And I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. I'll do that. And I just happened to be going through the, you know how Gmail's organized. You have your primary inbox, your promotions stuff, and your social stuff, whatever it is, however they organize it. I just happened to be going through one of those tabs that I don't go through often, and I saw the name and email address of the contact Jason had given me, and I'm like, well, fuck, why did this go there? Why Google? Why did this go to that tab where I didn't see it for 4 days? Basically, the guy had responded to me within 24, 48 hours of my initial email, and it wasn't the same person that was listed as a contact, but I'm sure it's just somebody in the same office who was handling Nels on this tour. But so I'm like, well, shit. Okay, so I respond to that and wait, basically a couple of days before hearing something else back. So of course, me during that waiting period of hearing back, of course I was like, oh, I'm so sorry I missed this. I don't know how it went to this thing, and is there still a chance to do it, blah blah blah. So I'm waiting and thinking, I blew it, it's not going to happen. This is one of my favorite guitarists from one of my favorite bands ever. His music and his playing has meant a lot to me, and I blew it. It's not going to happen. But of course it gets scheduled, no problem. And not only is it's truly one of the coolest, interviewing experiences that I've had. And with these, I'm always, I think I've probably said that with every songwriter, player, musician that I have admiration for, that I've talked to. I've said it with Robin Hitchcock. I've said it with Lou Barlow. I've said it with Joey Burns. John Rauhaus. I just have this assumption that there's, I don't know what I'm expecting, but I'm not expecting them to be as nice and as just kind of open and gracious as they are during the course of the interview. And it's been pretty great. I went up to talk to Nels in his hotel room. It was just very chill and relaxed. There was a brief kerfuffle there where there was some damage to one of the amps that had gotten shipped in for the gig that night, and there was the possibility of that being an issue he had to take care of, and but it all worked out. We had a great conversation. At this point, I'm relatively relaxed. There's a brief moment of intimidation on my part, of feeling intimidated, where here I am face to face with somebody that I've watched from as an audience member for years, and listened to through my headphones and speakers for years. And but then we started talking about Mark Ribot, which Nels very subtly and nicely corrected my pronunciation. I've called him Mark Ribot forever, but Mark Ribot, and who might argue with Nels Cline, who's friends and has played with him. and we talked about jazz